With Diane, I have a couple of instances, mainly the one when we all met for the first time. I don't know if you remember it. It was in East Harlem, and it was at a restaurant called Patsy's with the intimate cast.
With Diane, I can think of a few examples, but the big one is when we all met for the first time. I'm not sure if you remember. It took place in East Harlem at a diner called Size with a small group of people from The Godfather. They were co-stars at first and then became friends. But when pressure built on Diane Keaton, Hollywood changed both of them. No one spoke, not even Al Pacino. He said things that make me feel guilty, proud, and honest years later. Did he finally say that Hollywood turned them against each other, or was he just trying to protect her? Watch The Godfather Wars to see how Diane Keaton's independence met with the power in Hollywood. It wasn't just respect that Al Pacino felt when he spoke in front of the American Film Institute to honor Diane Keaton. It brought back memories and feelings of nostalgia, and it hinted that Diane had broken the rules in a field that doesn't usually accept them. Even though they were easy words, they said a lot about how Keaton had always been on the edges of Hollywood norms. Playful, strange, and not easily impressed. Pacino said that they didn't meet on a soundstage or at a casting call for the first time. A small Italian diner in East Harlem called Patsy's was where the small group of people from The Godfather got together. It took place in East Harlem at a restaurant called Patsy's, and it was just the stars of The Godfather. It was full of giants like Marlon Brando. Brando and Al Pacino watched as Keaton broke a rule that no one could see. She didn't give in to power, and he said, "Hi, Diane, my name is Marlon Brando." She looked up, shook his hand, and said, "Yeah, right. Okay, good. That's fine. Okay, you're right." That one moment showed her refusal to show respect, even for legends, which would become a theme of her whole career. It was a small act of defiance that shook up the Hollywood Golden Circle order in a quiet way. In both her job and her personality, Diane Keaton came into The Godfather as a stranger. Male executives ran the business around her, and many of them saw actresses as extras to help male stars look good. Keaton, on the other hand, had an unusual knack for controlling space without taking over it and for getting attention without trying to. But there was trouble going on behind the scenes of The Godfather. Paramount officials were very skeptical of Al Pacino's casting, thinking he was too young, too quiet, or too unconventional for the part. Diane later talked about this on The Graham Norton Show. She said that the company wanted to fire Pacino. I remember him talking about how they wanted to fire Pacino and get rid of him, but Francis Ford Coppola wouldn't. To show how smart Pacino was, he even shot the important restaurant scene where Michael Corleone kills the police officer. That scene saved Pacino's career and made him a legend. But in Hollywood's calculus, Keaton's public and private backing for him made her seem unpredictable and even dangerous. She wasn't loyal to company executives, but to art, to being real, and to the people she believed in. That freedom, which Pacino liked, was a red flag to a business that made a lot of money off of people following orders. There wasn't open hatred between Diane Keaton and Hollywood. It was a quiet battle. She didn't throw a fit. As expected, she just didn't care. In her early talks, she came across as a woman who wasn't interested in the Hollywood social scene. Even though some actors tried to be both glamorous and polite, Keaton wore men's blazers, spoke her mind, and refused to be sexualized long before it was cool to do so. At the time, critics took this as an act of oddity or pride. People who worked at the studio said she was hard to get along with and distant, but what they really meant was that she didn't follow the rules. In his later AFI speech, Pacino said, "It wasn't just advice. It was a reflection of how both of them understood the hypocrisy of Hollywood." Keaton was telling Pacino, "Don't give them an excuse to see you as self-important. In a business that praises artists in public but punishes them behind closed doors for being difficult to control." Later, she would be given the same name, called an artist who was too clean for the machines she worked with. Diane Keaton's role as Kay Adams, the stranger who watches the Cleone family from the edges of the movie The Godfather, was a reflection of her own life in Hollywood at the time. She took part in it, but she was never a part of it. Few actors at the time were brave enough to show emotional restraint like she did. Keaton played Kay as confused, morally grounded, and unwilling to give up her identity to power rather than the submissive, decorative archetype. A lot of people forgot how radical that was. In the 1970s, Hollywood still wanted women to show loyalty instead of doubt. Keaton broke that rule by making Kay more likable instead of romanticizing her. She showed people a woman with strong morals, which upset an industry that wanted to keep women as decorations instead of real people. Keaton's unusual behavior behind the camera made people both interested and annoyed. She was known for showing up to work without makeup, making up lines on the spot, and questioning the director's notes. Coppa liked how spontaneous she was, but studio execs saw it as not following the rules. For them, women who could think critically were bad. Keaton was a quiet symbol of artistic rebellion because she wouldn't fit in. Even her clothes, both on and off screen, became symbols of who she was. In a time when being glamorous meant being open, she chose to remain anonymous. When she worked with Woody Allen on Annie Hall later on, that style became part of popular culture. But at the time, Hollywood didn't think it would sell. The irony was very funny. The things that would later make her famous were the same things that made people doubt her at first. Part of the anger toward Keaton came from wanting what she had. She was more than just an actor. She thought, took pictures, and then became a director. People who were used to seeing actors compete for attention were scared off by her smarts, which she often hid with self-deprecating humor. She didn't look for approval, which made people who depend on praise nervous. Keaton didn't make as much money off of The Godfather's success as other people did. She pulled back, didn't promote herself, and focused on working carefully. In Hollywood, where motion is very important, this choice confused a lot of people. Insiders started calling her difficult to manage, which was a code word for women who didn't follow the studio's rules. The way Keaton felt about fame was another quiet act of defiance. Her peers created mythical public pictures of themselves, but she was honest about her insecurities and wouldn't try to perfect herself. In conversations, she often gave credit to other people who worked with her, especially Pacino, and Coppa and Brando. But her modesty made it harder to put her in a box. Was she gullible or sneaky? Was her humility real? Or was it just a way for her to protect herself from a system she didn't trust? When she praised Coppola's genius for protecting Pacino's part, she made things confusing and scary at the same time. Her respect for him was very different from her lack of interest in Hollywood's managers and executives. People thought Keaton was part of the dangerous artistic camp because he was loyal to a director over the studio line. This was because Keaton valued honesty over making money. Her reluctance wasn't based on pride, but on knowing herself. As she learned, Hollywood's love is conditional. It's given away for free, but quickly taken away if you stop playing the game. That's why the way she played Kay. In hindsight, Adam's words make even more sense. It was a disguised self-portrait of a woman who was surrounded by power but quietly refused to be corrupted by it. The Diane Keaton character that broke Hollywood's rules and made the business think. Diane Keaton had already made something that Hollywood didn't know how to market: realism. By the time she switched from The Godfather to Annie Hall, Keaton went from being a quiet observer in the Corleone story to being the strange androgynous lead in Woody Allen's world. This was the start of a creative paradox. The same business that she wanted to sell her freedom, even though she used to doubt it. Keaton never made things easy, though. She didn't show her individuality. It came out in her. The contrast was too much for the people in charge in Hollywood. The movie business praised her for being so smart. The same people who were close to her said behind closed doors that she was too strange, too smart, and too out of control. To a business that depends on image and following the rules. Keaton's skill to surprise people was both a strength and a weakness. Hollywood didn't dislike Keaton because of a controversy. It was because she wouldn't let herself be labeled. She was living in a time when women were expected to carry out the ideas of male directors. Still, she handled her jobs with a level of control that made the system nervous. Keaton's natural rhythm was mirrored in Annie Hall's free-form, improvisational tone. The film's dialogue, clothing, and even her awkward silences were extensions of her real personality. The mix of male and female styles that became her trademark. The outfit of wide ties, slouchy vests, and men's pants wasn't suggested by designers. It belonged to her. Kate Blanchett later said that Ralph Lauren, who designed the costumes for the movie, actually came up with the Annie Hall look. She didn't rebel against being a woman. She rebelled against being told what a woman should look like. She took charge of her own life, which made her a hero with fans and a problem for traditionalists. Hollywood didn't shape her. She made it shape itself. And that shift in power made people angry. Hollywood was ruled by stereotypes in the 1970s and 1980s. The ingenue, the femme fatale, and the muse. Keaton wasn't any of them. Her characters were smart but worried. Sure of themselves but not too sure of themselves. Passionate but not obedient. For casting agents and producers, this duality was scary because it made it hard to tell what parts women were supposed to play. Her appearance on screen was strange. She knew how to be vulnerable without looking weak and how to be funny without looking stupid. Executives who were used to controlling female stories didn't like that subtle power. People called Keaton elitist when she started picking parts based on what they were about instead of how they looked. But all she was doing was practicing her freedom in a system that wasn't meant to let her. In Hollywood, Diane Keaton was surrounded by envy, which was a steady, quiet stream. She was successful without being shocking, loved without being needy, and looked up to by her male peers without looking like she relied on them. There was a lot of talk about her connections with powerful people like Woody Allen and Warren Beatty, but Keaton's refusal to use using them for press only made her more mysterious. She never used personal stories to get what she wanted. Instead, she let her work talk. People who knew her started calling her distant and even cocky, a word that's often used to describe women who set limits in places where men rule. Keaton's space wasn't separation. It was defense. She kept her personal life secret because she lived in a town where close relationships are often based on money. That privacy feels like a protest. Diane Keaton's sense of fun was another way she hid things. She didn't try to become the mysterious screen siren. Instead, she made fun of herself, making her insecurity into her identity. Her clever, self-deprecating wit put people at ease, but it confused people in a business that liked to be important. When asked about her love life in interviews, she would often dodge the question with humor instead of a statement because she didn't want to feed the tabloids. That self-control gave her strength, while others depended on attention to be important. Keaton was both mysterious and difficult to control because she wouldn't give out too much information. PR people couldn't guess who she would be. She would wear gloves and hats to award shows that were decades out of style, and she would smile slyly as the cameras tried to figure out what style she was wearing. They didn't know that Keaton had known for a long time what most people in Hollywood hadn't. The most powerful thing is mystery. In private, her refusal to follow conventions went beyond movies and clothes. Keaton was one of the few actors of her time who didn't feel bad about talking about getting older. Many of her friends gave in to Hollywood's beauty standards, but she refused to have any invasive changes made to her. Instead, she chose to accept how her features were changing naturally. In a field that is obsessed with youth, her views on getting older were very different. She once said that she didn't want to look like she was stuck in time, which was a subtle dig at the idea of fake perfection that surrounded star culture. By aging the way she wanted, Keaton broke one of Hollywood's oldest rules about being mature. She was showing that you could live a long time without fitting in, and that your charm didn't depend on hiding signs of time. But being so real cost something. As the business became more commercial, Keaton's artistic integrity made her stand out. Studio bosses thought she was unpredictable. Directors found her scary, and younger actors thought they couldn't get in touch with her. There was a story going on behind the curtain that was not being told. Janet Leigh wasn't one of them. She didn't make connections like other people did not go to the right events, not trying to get power by being nice. In a place where access means chance, Keaton's distance meant that she was left out. Movie stars began giving more points for visibility than skill. Keaton's quiet personality and failure to push herself too hard made her seem like a holdover from a more honest time. Even though she didn't have very strong political or social views, she often spoke out in ways that were at odds with Hollywood's performative action. Keaton fought for human freedom and uniqueness based on self-determination, not ideology. People both liked and disliked her because she rarely joined groups or used her stage to make slogans. Few people thought her silence was rude. For some, it was nonconformity. Keaton was an outsider in a time when uniformity was passed off as progress because she didn't want to follow Hollywood's groupthink. Style, speech, and morals were the only things she never did that were in style. Her friendship with Pacino was one of the few things that didn't change as Hollywood's relationships did. Pacino, who is known for being private and picky, seemed to understand how she felt about being alone. Their respect for each other came from fighting together. Two artists who won't let anyone into their private lives. Pacino's support of Keaton throughout his career wasn't just out of love. Yes, it was praise. He knew that some people didn't like her because she had hurt anyone, but because she wouldn't fit in with anyone else. But Hollywood punishes freedom in a way that looks like lack of interest. Keaton's honesty was a mirror that made other people feel bad. That made them think of what they had given up to fit in. Keaton's rift with Hollywood became clearer as her friends started taking on parts that were based on their public image. Keaton, on the other hand, kept changing who she was. She directed movies, tried her hand at photography, and wrote personal, not dramatic, autobiographies. While outsiders praised her creativity, people who knew her well often said she was too serious. The irony was very clear. Someone who used to be thought of as weird was now being criticized for having too much depth. That contradiction showed that Hollywood has two sets of rules. Women could be weird or beautiful, but they could never be smart and in charge at the same time. Keaton was hard to put into a single category because he could switch between being funny and smart. And putting things into groups is what Hollywood does best. Keaton's change wasn't just artistic, it was about existence. Others looked for heritage in the form of awards and praise, but she looked for meaning in the form of creation. Whether she was starring, writing, or directing, every project she worked on had the same theme: independence. She wasn't after fame. She was keeping track of her interest. In a business where even authenticity is finally turned into a product, her refusal to making money off of herself made her seem strange. There was no anger in Hollywood toward Diane Keaton because she failed. It didn't like her because she got things done without obeying. Some people thought that getting approval was the only way to be successful, but she did well even without it. The fact that she chose to stay single was another quiet act of defiance that made traditionalists nervous. Keaton changed what it meant to be complete in a world where actors were often defined by the men they married or the families they started. She adopted kids later in life on her own terms without making a big deal out of it. This very private and unusual choice solidified her image as a woman who followed her own rules in a field so focused on controlling stories that freedom was unacceptable. She changed the rules of what it means to be a woman in Hollywood by doing things, not just talking about them. Keaton's continued impact, even after she cut ties with Hollywood's social scene, showed an unspoken truth about the business. It's afraid of women who don't need it anymore. Because she wouldn't be turned into a product, she became a symbol that people both admired and disliked. Her co-workers talked about how smart she was with a mix of respect and discomfort. She had achieved the balance between being seen and not being seen, between being famous and being far away. The power was in that balance. And in Hollywood, where fame and power are often mixed up, Diane